when you're starting a business, like a coaching business or a LinkedIn business, people are like, hey, build a community, and they'll buy whatever it is you're selling. And so you start building this community, and you get frustrated a little bit that it's not going as planned. And so you're like, hey, why are all these people just
Welcome to the Raw and Real podcast. Are you dreaming of changing your life through opening a business, or are you curious what obstacles entrepreneurs had to overcome in their journey? Then you're in the right place. My name is Agnes and I'm your host. Welcome back to another episode of Raw and Real. Today's guest on the show is Nate Peo. Nate is a personal brand strategist and specializes in building a tribe, finding your voice, and giving your brand the right personality. He's also a LinkedIn coach and the host of the inspirational podcast called All In. Nate describes himself as a super connector, as he's very passionate about bringing people together in mutually successful ways. Hey, Nate, it's awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me on. Super excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so, I checked you out online a little bit and I saw that you were for a long time a professional buyer. So I'm very curious about that story. But before we really go into it, I'm also very curious about getting to know you as a person. So can you share a little bit like what were your dreams and what did you want to be when you grew up? And like how did you really end up being in purchasing?
Okay. Well, I don't know when exactly it started happening, but when I was in junior high and high school, and you take like auto shop, or you take, woodworking classes, like these skill based like stuff, I think back then the girls took the home ec, and the boys took shop. And I never really felt comfortable in the auto mechanic world. I didn't understand like the woodworking and all this stuff, but I took some drafting classes, and I really enjoyed drafting. And this was like, architectural drafting, engineering drafting, where you had like rulers and straight edges and triangles and T-squares and pencils, and you do your little things and start off drawing like three-dimensional squares, and then it turned into more like complex stuff, and then it eventually evolved into doing like drafting of houses, stuff like that related to architectural. So probably from the time I was in junior high till the time I was about ready to graduate high school, I thought I wanted to be an architect. I was like, hey, I like this drawing, I like this drafting, like I could do this. This could be my thing. I kind of felt like my passion. And at the time, I thought like my life was mapped out. Like there was no uncertainty. It was just, this was the flow I was going to go. And then I got into architecture school. And the way the architecture school was really, really competitive. You had to, it was hard first to get in. They took in like 125 people, but then they graduated somewhere like 25. So like most of the people didn't make it. And it took 6 years to do the program. And after the first 2 years, you had to apply every year after. You had to apply year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. So you could even get to year 4, year 5 and still not get accepted into year 6, and then, have to either find something else to do or go do it. So that was on the back of my mind when I started, and I knew that, and I was like, yeah, whatever, it is what it is. But what kind of threw me for a loop was I started taking these architectural classes on the theory of architecture, on the artistry. I don't know if that word is right, but artistry of architecture, and what this space meant, or why they designed the building this way. And I realized like I like drafting, but I am not at all competent in the creative, the artistic, this masterpiece criteria. And as I was doing it, I'm taking the college classes, I realized like, hey, this isn't really something that I think I'm going to like doing. Like I made a mistake. And one of the other fallback diplomas, I guess you could call it, is construction management. And a lot of people went to school for construction management. A lot of people that didn't make it through the architectural program, year 3 or 4, dropped back into construction management, because a lot of the same courses you took and a lot of it applied to the same thing. And that's what I did. I dropped back into construction management, which is kind of combining a business degree with how to be in construction. So you learn like engineering principles, you learn how to estimate construction, you learn how to run a business in a construction sense of the world. And I loved it. And I did my degree in that. And then when I graduated college, I grew up in Nebraska, middle of the United States, cold, cold winters, hot, hot summers, and I hated the weather. I hated the winter, and I knew when I graduated college I was going to move out to California or Arizona, whichever the one I ended up in. I didn't care, but I knew they didn't have some cold snows and didn't have winter, so I was like, "That's where I'm going." So I graduated college, moved out to California. That's where the company hired me on, and I started building water treatment plants, and that was something I had no clue about and no structure, and did that for a few years. And then what was going on in 2004, 2005 in the United States was this massive housing bubble. Like houses were just being built as quickly as possible as they could do it. And there was a shortage of people that knew what they were doing. And I started getting recruited to go work in the home building industry. And they said, like, hey, do you want to come work here? We'll pay you a lot more money. You'll have less hours and a shorter commute. Like all these things, like you couldn't say no to. I was like, yeah, sure. I'd love to do it. And they hired me in a purchasing role. And what that meant was you were the person that sent the plans out to bid, solicited the contractors to give you all their proposals, and then you reviewed them, make sure that they were uh, complete, they're accurate, they were within budget and all this stuff, and you hired the subcontractors that actually went out and built the work. So that's how I got into purchasing. When I was working for the other company, it was like a role you did, but it wasn't your only title. And then the home building world, that's what it was. And then from about 2005 till this year, that's what I've been doing is residential purchasing, figuring out what trades we're going to use to build the houses. That's the local type purchasing. And then national wise is figuring out what materials you're going to use. A lot of national accounts, like where you buying your laundry from, where you buying your floors from, where you buying your drywall from, all those things. That was what I did was help write specifications, figure out the products we were going to use, and then hire the people that were going to install
Wow, that sounds like a really cool journey. So, how does podcasting fit into all of this?
it. It's funny, like that it doesn't make sense on paper, but I grew up introverted. I grew up shy. I grew up nervous to go meet people I hadn't met before. And as somebody that's in purchasing, you think like, okay, why do I need to go network? I've got people coming up, calling me all the time, knocking on the door, trying to get in front of me so that they can pitch their products. I may or may not make a decision. So for somebody that didn't really want to go networking, didn't necessarily need to do it, I've asked myself like, a lot of times like, well, why should I get involved with industry networking events? And some people were telling me when I started my career, like, hey, you got to get out, you got to meet some people. Like, you just never know what's going to happen. These are going to be your peers. These are people going up through the career with you, and there's always something that could go wrong in the relationships you have with the people you're doing business. You might need somebody else to come in one day. So they kind of encouraged me to start going to some networking events, and I started doing it, and I started, becoming more comfortable about it. And over time, and I'm talking like years of time, like I developed good relationships with a lot of people, and it influenced the way I did my purchasing. Like there's two schools of thought. Is one, you could call up the people and grind on them. You could treat them poorly. You could yell at them and, hey, you got to sharpen your pencil. You got to get a better price, and just really beat them up to get the price you wanted and you needed. Or you worked with building relationships. You looked at hiring people that you brought in as part of the team, and you sold them on the idea of, hey, we're accomplishing something that we're needing you to be a part of. We want to do it, and we have budgets we need to stay with under. And you work together to collaboratively build this project under budget, on time, and schedule, and meet the quality standards. And what I found is the approach to have a more collaborative approach tended to work out better in the long run than the grind on people, treat them like crap, and just try to get the lowest possible deal out of somebody. Because what ends up happening is if they're not making any money, they're not going to want to go service your job. The quality slips, the schedule slips. And if they're not making money, they might go out of business. And if they go out of business, it's going to cost you a lot more money to replace them than it would just been to get a fair price and do it right. So I realized that building relationships was critical to doing my role effectively, which was hiring the subcontractors and getting the materials on the job for somebody else to manage and get it built. And so when I started realizing that and I started focusing on that, then I started realizing it happened through networking. You started building those relationships with networking. Either you were, talking about things going on in each other's life. It's not just like, hey, what are you selling me? What am I buying? But hey, who are you as a person? Who are you as a human? You go to lunch sometimes, or maybe you go get a beer, or you see them at the industry events, and all of a sudden, like over time, like these people you're making friends with when you first start your career, it's like you have your work friends and you have your weekend friends. And a lot of the weekend friends were people you knew from school or knew from college or kind of knew
Yeah.
from around the way. But as you got older, they started having life happen, right? They'd get married, they'd have kids, they'd move away. And those people uh, left, but the people within your industry that were kind of casual acquaintances, you experienced those things in life with them that your other friends, moved away and did. So like as you got married and you had kids, your colleagues and coworkers were doing the same thing. And so you started kind of growing with them, and those work friends became your like real friends. And there's just a lot of stuff kind of happening where I was like, this is interesting. And along came this job opportunity I took, and I got put into a different role, and I needed to have different answers to different questions to do my job appropriately. And I realized I had good connections with a lot of the trade partners, but I didn't have a lot of good connections with more people within this home building industry. And I said, okay, I'm going to work on those connections. I'm going to start going to the places they hang out with. I'm going to start building relationships with those types of people. In a few years, I had relationships with them, and I started noticing like, hey, the more I built my network, the more valuable I got to be to my employer. Not that I had a big network and they wanted to pay me more money, but it was
Mhm.
more like I had more tools to solve more problems. And the more tools I had to solve more problems, the more valuable I became. So I was like, what would it look like if I expanded it from my local industry to the national industry, the national accounts? I started to go into networking events that those people hung out with and started building relationships with the people that were selling national account products. And wouldn't you know it, same thing happens. My network grows. I'm more valuable to my employer, and things are taking off. So about a year ago, I just was thinking of ideas, just kind of kicking things around that were like entrepreneurial stuff. And there's a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's talking about like, hey, you should be documenting your journey. And so I was like thinking, like, what could I document? Like, what would be interesting to do? And I was like, what would be kind of interesting is like these meetings you have with people when you meet them for the first time, and you grab a beer, you grab a coffee, and you're kind of chit chatting with them, and you see where that relationship goes. And I was like, well, what would it look like if instead of just casually unintentionally building your network like in sporadic bursts, like, oh, I need a network for like 3 months, and then you do that, then you take 3 months off, and then 3 months back on, like not intentionally but just kind of like haphazardly. What if you did it with intention every single day for like a year or 3 years or 5 years? What would happen if every single day you intentionally expanded your network with the idea of like, hey, in 5 years time, wherever you think was possible, you're going to underestimate it. And if you know that you're going to underestimate what 5 years is going to look like, let's raise that standard even higher of what's possible. And you're still going to miss it because you're going to put this intention. So I started just going like, I'm going to network every single day. And if somebody wants to meet, I'm going to say yes. And let me see where that takes me. And so as I was kind of coming up with this idea and thinking about doing it, I was like, okay, well, you can't just always be out hunting for people to meet with. You have to attract some people in there. And if you want to attract people in there, document it. You're going to need to put yourself on social media. And then it hit me again. Hey, every time I got to like a roadblock in life, it was always something that I was scared to play to the next level. And social media is one of those things. Like you've done this, like, hey, I got a social media account, whoop de doo, I post some pictures of what I'm eating or what I did on the weekend, or maybe an opinion I have. but not consistently, not often, and not really take a stand and put yourself out there. Like we get to the point where you go, hey, that's not for me to be big and bold. That's for somebody else. That's what these influencers do. I'm not an influencer. So but well, why can't I be? Why can't I be somebody that steps out of their comfort zone and pushes the limits and sees where this goes and people pay attention to and take advice and learn from. And I said, because it's scary. That's why I can't do it. It scares me to do that. And so I thought, hey, you're gonna have to push past those limiting beliefs. You're going to have to do things that you think are uncomfortable because if anybody wants to do big things in life, they're going to have to play bigger. And so I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then I was kicking the idea around of a podcast, and the podcast started making a lot of sense because, again, Gary Vaynerchuk said, "Hey, remember that kid in high school that wasn't that cool, but his parents went out of town for the weekend, and because his parents went out of town for the weekend, he had a party, and then the cool kids came to his party, and by default, he was cool."
Yeah.
That's what a podcast allows you to do. And I was like, that makes total sense because one, I was that kid in high school that parents went out of town, had a party. And by default, I became kind of cool and got a bunch of people that probably wouldn't show up for my party otherwise to come to it. So I started this idea of going down the path of creating a podcast. And again, it was like scary. It was nerve wracking. I was like, what if nobody wants to be my guest? What if I don't have anything to talk about? What if? Okay, you got what ifs. You got to do it. You got to do it anyways. And that's how I got started podcasting. And I made up my decision early. I said, I've wanted to do things similar before, but I always gave up when it felt a little bit too hard, a little bit too challenging. But I didn't want to do something either that I hated doing and it wasn't serving me right. So if it was going to make me, um, emotionally unhappy, like I needed to have a way to be cool with it. Like it's okay to not do something, but you're doing it because it doesn't feel right, not because it was scary or something like that. So I just said, hey, look, I'm going to do 50 podcasts, 50 or 100, I don't remember. So I'm going to do 100 podcasts. And at the end of 100 podcasts, then you can decide if you want to continue it or not. And then if you decide to not continue it, that's okay. You made a decision consciously that said, I did it. I put it in there and I learned from it and I learned what I liked and didn't like. And I've made a decision to not continue it, or I did decide to continue it to do it. But on the flip side, if I hadn't made that commitment to myself, I probably would have quit early on in the process. So, like, what I thought was going to be the problem was uh, finding guests, being on a guest, having conversations with.
Yeah.
I thought that was the hard part. The hard part for me was recording and logistics. Like,
Hmm.
at first, I wanted to have this like podcast based on the idea of what I talked about with like you meet somebody for the first time over beer and coffee, and I wanted it to be live and in person. Like, hey, there's something to be said about those live in-person conversations. So I was like, hey, we're going to meet at a coffee shop. We're going to meet at a bar. We're going to record this stuff. And then you try to do it and you realize like every little noise that's going on in the background, you hear. But when we're conversing, we don't realize it. But when you listen back on radio, like, did you just hear that? That was like a jet that went overhead. Like we heard every little bit of it. So that was kind of one challenge. And then logistically, it's really hard to, coordinate a time to go meet with somebody in a public place, find a spot that's quiet enough to record and not get interrupted. And so that was kind of challenging. Like all these little like technology problems I thought would be kind of easy were really challenging. And I was like, if I hadn't made that commitment to myself, I would have been like, yeah, you know what, like the podcasting, I give it a shot. It's just too complex, too hard for me. Like somebody else should be podcasting. I'm not patient enough to do that. And because I carried through with it, like I learned a lot of lessons along the way, and that's how I started podcasting. And then it just kind of like took off. COVID hit. Everybody went virtual. I was like, hey, I didn't want to be that virtual Zoom podcast host, but like here I was, I had to do it. And what I thought people not wanting to be on my show turned out to be the exact opposite. People were always, I had no shortage of guests coming on, and I ended up recording from one a week, which I wanted to do, to doing like 6 or 7 a week. And I was like, oh my God, there's just way too many.
Yeah.
So it was like hard to kind of keep up with it. And I had to learn from that. And I had to kind of like scale back what I wanted to do and be a little bit more restrictive of the people I'd have on my show.
So I'm very curious because you mentioned that you started growing your network, right? So were you always very strategic about the connections you would make, or also your commitment? Was it just to network with cool people or really people that could somehow advance you?
I think it's kind of a combination of both. So when I started networking, I had to figure out what works for me. And it was always stressful if like I was meeting with you and I was like, okay, I need to pitch you, I need to tell you what I'm doing, I need to sell you. Like it would stress me out that I was going to do that. And but what where I started not being stressed out was like, what if I just had a conversation with you and I found out what were struggling with and what you needed to have happen in your life, or maybe something not a struggle, but like, hey, this is like somebody I really think you should have a conversation with. I think the two of you together will be better off than not knowing each other. And if I can make that introduction, what happens like that? And so I started treating my networking that way is not like, hey, what can I do for you? What can we do for each other business wise? But like, who in my network could I make an introduction to you to? And I started having that attitude of just constantly like going, okay, 20-minute conversation with somebody or more. And then from that conversation, who's two people I can introduce to them that would further along them in their goals. And what I found is that when I was giving first, I started meeting way cooler people. I started meeting very heart-centered people. I started meeting people that wanted to see others grow and support. And they shared like a common thread of what I did, which was just like they love the human connection and connecting with other people. And it actually, started growing from there. And that's how I started leveraging my network was just out there, just like, who can I make introductions to?
So you mentioned the heart-centered relationships as well, and they're really important. So what do you really do in order to build these relationships?
Um, to build like a heart-centered relationship, I think you have to have the mentality first of like you're giving without an expectation of anything in return. You're just doing things because it feels good for you to do that. You're not expecting somebody to give you money back. You're not expecting anybody to return the favor. You're not keeping score like that. I think when you start that way, it's just like, hey, there's no agenda. I'm just going to have a conversation with you and find out who you are as a person and let you tell your story and find out ways that who you are. And so to be heart centric, you have to drop this one-sided dimension of you, especially if it's like a business relationship. Because if you're just about business, if you're selling to me, I'm gonna have my guard up, right? I'm gonna be like, Agnes, you're gonna come up, you're gonna try to sell me on something. So guards up. I'll converse with you, but I'm not gonna get too close to you. And one of the things that happened through this journey was I started sharing parts of my life publicly that I hadn't in the past. And one of them was a relationship with alcohol and like how it makes me feel, and if I drinking or if I'm not drinking, and the struggle a lot of people had, which is like, hey, we go to a lot of industry events, and they could be 3 to 5 times, not 5 times, but like 2 or 3 times a week, and then 2 or 3 times a week there's an open bar and you have 2 or 3 beers at it or 2 or 3 drinks, and then the weekend comes and you have a few more drinks, and all like you're like, I'm drinking 5 to 7 nights out of the week, not excessively every night, but it's a lot. And it's like, what do you do? Because I don't necessarily need it. So I started having these type of conversations, and other people in the industry reached out to me privately and related to it. And because they like related to it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're not selling me something. You're not this one-dimensional salesperson. You're an actual human being that goes through the same challenges we all go through, and we all face, and we all have some insecurities. We all have some self-doubt. We all have other interests outside of work. And I realized that like, hey, heart-centered relationship means dropping those barriers, those walls down. Instead of being personal and professional, we merge the two of who we are uniquely us, what makes us, and those friendships become deeper, they become stronger, and we're vested in everybody else's success rather than just what's kind of happening to us, or keeping people at arm's length because we don't want to get them too close. All of a sudden we drop that guard, we become closer, and that's when I think you're able to really grow what you're capable of doing in life, the impact you have, the influence you have.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm also curious because you are very engaged on LinkedIn overall, and I see you posting a lot, and you have a lot of engagement on your posts. So do you have a certain routine when it comes to LinkedIn, and how do you get all of that engagement?
My routine with LinkedIn is consistency. That's where it started with. It's evolved from what you're comfortable with. So a lot of times people go like, "Hey, I'm going to be active on LinkedIn. I need to post 5 days, 7 days a week," and they're not like ready to run that race yet. They're not conditioned for it. They haven't like mastered um, their voice and creating and telling their stories. So then when they don't achieve that, they fall back, and it goes from like 3 days in a row to it's been 3 weeks since my last post to 3 months, and then before they're not doing anything. So I probably started off doing like 3 to 4 a week consistently, and that's about a year ago. And I would try to engage with people, and I would try to uh, go on other people's posts and liking and comment on those and try to establish a conversation. And then that evolved to being a bit more comfortable. Like it used to take hours to come up and think of an idea that I wanted to talk about or what I wanted to post about or what I felt comfortable. Well, at this point now, like there's very few things that um, I like struggle internally with of like, oh, that's something I shouldn't put out there. Like I have self-doubt about putting it out there. And if I do feel it, like sometimes if I feel like I type something and I don't want to put that out there because I'm not sure what some people might think or if it's like timely or if it's appropriate, then I put it out there anyways, because if it feels like I need to hold back on it, I got to push the limits and do it anyway. So that's what I started doing. So when people are like, what should I do to be active on LinkedIn, is just go like, hey, wherever you're at in your journey, you're going to learn more the more you do it. So if you're just beginning or you're medium, skill set, or you're an expert, if you keep practicing, you're going to get better. So start with what you're comfortable in. Can you do 2 or 3 times a week? And can you do it consistently on the same days, roughly around the same time? And you start posting. And I say, well, what do I post about? Well, you can post really about anything, but you should probably talk about your story, who you are in general, your business side of you, your personal side of you, and what you feel comfortable about. So like if you're just getting started, you're probably a little bit nervous to share anything that's too personal or it's too controversial for business. You kind of play the middle of the road, something easy and safe. But people are going to relate more to you the more real and authentic you are, and the more real and authentic you can be, which is challenging, but you get better at it when you kind of test the limit. So if you go like, hey, I could never share this story about my first time showing up for work, and I was so embarrassed at this event that happened, but if you post it and all of a sudden like it's your most engaged post and everybody reaches out and supports you and said like, hey, I had something like that happen to me, I'm so glad you shared this story, I totally get it. Like all of a sudden you're like, I need to tell more of these stories because that's what people resonate and want to hear with. So, and as you're doing that, you learn to tell your stories a little bit better. So for me, it goes from it used to be an hour or 2 hours to think of an idea and type it up, or I kind of have a general idea of what I want to roll with, but I just do it in the morning. Most of them are done in the morning before I start the day, and they're what I feel like in the morning. I don't like if I do too much pre-planned stuff, like I say, okay, next Monday I'm going to talk about this business. If I don't feel it, then like, it's hard to write about it with passion. Or you might write something very like important like a month ago, and then crazy stuff's going on in the world, and it's like, hey, that's really not appropriate today. So then your post kind of went to waste. But there are some, like if I do video post or more like a document post, they take a little bit more time to prepare. So I can't just do it in the moment right away in the morning. They do take a little bit. So I might make them a day or two in advance. But yeah, the thing to me has just been, if you show up consistently, you're going to learn so much about yourself. It becomes so much easier, and you start there'll be people that will find you. They'll relate to your story. They're like, hey, I have commonality in this stuff. I believe this same stuff. You're inspiring me to do things I didn't see possible. And finding your voice is one of the best gifts you can give yourself. It really is.
So When it comes to finding your voice and really telling your story, what do you think someone should look at and start out with?
If you look at, like, I'm gonna call it your personal brand. And your personal brand is scary. You think about, like, what is my personal brand? Like, what am I? Who am I? What do I what how do I define me? And you want to put yourself into this box, and you want to have this logo and this image. And okay, that's too overwhelming. I can never do that. But your personal brand is really, it's you. It's you, uniquely you. You have a set of circumstances in your life that nobody else had. Like, you grew up a certain way, you went to the same things, you interacted with different people throughout your life, you've had different influences. Like, there's nobody that's had these exact same experiences of you. And there's nobody going through life the exact same way you're going through life, but there's people going through similar circumstances that relate. And so when you share your story that's uniquely you, it builds this rapport and makes you relatable. So you think about, like, your best friends in your life or your family, like, maybe not your family because they're blood related, they have to like you, but your friends that go, like, why do I really like this person? Why do they really like me? And it tends to be, they know the flaws, they know the perfections, they know all this, the good and the bad and the ugly about you, and you're interested in a lot of commonalities and you're interested in supporting each other. So it's like, well, use your post to build that same rapport with your audience. Like, it doesn't have to be at that level of detail that your best friend knows everything, but you still want to be very relatable. And so when you go, like, well, where should I start? What should I talk about? Your life is your content. Anything that's happening today in your life, whether it's related to business or personal or business and personal, or a bad experience you had on the way to the office that morning, or a great experience, or just like you saw a charming act of kindness at the grocery store that day, like, anything that's happening, those are things that are uniquely you, and you can spin it to your story. So you might say, hey, like, this thing happened, I saw it today, like, somebody gave um paid it for. They bought the coffee for me and had in line, and so I bought the person behind me in line. So okay, well, that's just, but that story could be related to business. Have you ever given something back to somebody else that wasn't expecting it? Talk about that. Boom, that's like a piece of content that shares some insight into who you are and what it's like. And so if you're using it to build a business brand or a job or something like that, it's giving insight into somebody going, like, hey, would I want to work with this person? Would I feel like I would trust them to do it and say what they're talking about doing? Do they feel like I got the expertise I know? Would I really enjoy spending time with this person? Is it going to feel more like a friendship or more like a really awful experience to go through and I'm pulling my teeth out? So that's why I think personal branding is so important, because it's giving people some insight into who you are and if they're going to relate and do well by having you in your circle of, build basically your tribe.
Yeah, I really like that when you say building your tribe. So I'm also wondering, what do you think is the best way to monetize your followers and your tribe? Because that's often the intention behind it, right?
I don't know. I'm seeing some things happen recently um that hadn't worked in the past. And I'll tell you what they are, is like, when you're starting a business, like a coaching business or a LinkedIn business, people are like, hey, build a community, and they'll buy whatever it is you're selling. And so you start building this community, and you get frustrated a little bit that it's not going as planned. And so you're like,
Yeah.
hey, why are all these people just, like, doing whatever it can to be in my community, in my group, and buy what I'm talking about, and love it? And it's like, okay, like, how long does it take to build a community? I think you have to be a bit more patient. So I started a bunch of months ago. I was like, I'm going to build a Facebook community, and I've seen other people have Facebook groups, tons of community. Like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do this thing, and then, like, I put effort into it, and it fizzles out real quick, and I'm like, well, like, did it not build community because of me? Or, like, what was the problem? Did I not engage with it enough? Did I give up too quick? Did I not have the right people in the group? Did I not have enough people in the group? And okay, that's it. Or then you start a course, and maybe some people take part in it, and then they don't really, they lose interest, and it fizzles out too. And it's like, oh man, maybe maybe there's something wrong with me. And just recently, about a week ago, well, actually, I think it was a little bit more than a week ago. Somebody I casually knew on LinkedIn, we were just kind of chit chatting back and forth about posting regularly, like every single day. And I was like, well, I'm pretty much doing 5 days a week, pretty consistently. Like occasionally it'll be four, but I might make it up, whatever. And I just started adding Saturday and Sunday posts in because, and my reason was simple. It was like, hey, there's already a shortage of content, and most people don't post on Saturday and Sunday that are posting regularly. But we're all a bunch of LinkedIn junkies. We're all still logging in on Saturdays and Sundays and look scrolling through. So I was like, what if you just put in casual posts on Saturday, casual posts on Sunday, and see what happens? So I just started doing like 3 sentence, like almost like a Twitter post, just like a thought of the day, or just like what I'm up to, or what I'm looking forward to that week, and just putting it out there and just like letting it ride, not really doing a whole lot to make it grow or engage, just kind of see. And it was getting a ton of like action. And so I was kind of like, there might be something to this. We were chatting about this. She's like, let's do a 365 challenge where we just like we'll make a hashtag and we'll talk about posting every day. I was like, okay, cool. Well, let's just create a group too, a LinkedIn group, and put some people in there that might be interested, so they can like and support each other. Because you know, might as well, because like if 10 people do it and we become kind of friends, we'll kind of wish we had that little group. And if we didn't, we'll be like, oh, we should have had a group. So we started a group, and there's like 160 people in it, like within a week. Like it just like took off. Like people got kind of inspired on this idea, this challenge. And then another friend of mine's like, hey, we're going to host this webinar, and like we've got a ton of interest, a ton of people coming out to it. And I think I realized is that when you're trying to force a community, force a tribe to create on its own, it feels that way. You have to get people wanting to be bought in into a stronger why, a stronger reason to belong. So if I'm just talking about hey, grow your brand on LinkedIn, that might not be as a compelling of a why to somebody that doesn't find interest in it. But if I said, hey, let's all support each other to do things a little bit better, and like hold ourselves accountable, people are like, hey, I want to be a part of that. And the community has to exist without you. You can be the focus of it, you can be the head of it, the leader of it, but anything that's going to be big and huge, at some point you can't personally manage it yourself. You can't keep up with the relationships of thousands of people. Like you're kind of going to cap yourself out at a few hundred. So you're going to need other people that are bought in and supporting it and pushing the mission, and let it take off a life of its own. So imagine me and you're having a conversation. We're talking about this. We have a certain dynamic. And if your friend Joey comes over and he joins the conversation, the dynamics changed a little bit, right? And we
They
might
do.
still be talking about the same thing, but there's another point of view. And then you bring in 5 people, and then 6 people, and then 7 people. And now maybe there's 2 conversations going on at the same time, and it's kind of going on. And then let's say we filled up the room with people we knew and liked and trusted. Like I might know half the people, you might know half the people. We might have some overlap, and we might be people none of us know, but other people in the group know. And that I think is what a community does. And it's like, it's not something that you can personally organically curate and control. You have to have a mission, a why that people want to be a part of it. And then you have to have other people that want to be on it with you, and that encourage their others to bring their followers. So I think what I've learned is being patient and letting things evolve, and not try to force things to happen, just kind of like roll with it. And if you show up consistently, these things they'll take place. And not saying like don't try them, because like you have to try things, you have to figure out what works and what doesn't, because if you don't do anything, like nothing will ever happen. But if like you try to create a community and it doesn't really take off, like don't say like, oh, I tried that and I'm not going to let it. It was just maybe it wasn't the right time, or it wasn't the right buy-in, or it wasn't like the right whatever. Just be patient and just keep going after it. Let things evolve on their own.
Do you still have a last key takeaway, a personal insight that helped you grow and you would like to share?
This is a journey a lot of us are on. And well, one, no matter what you're doing in life, you're on a journey. You're going somewhere in life, and like you can either be in control of where that's going, or you can let it happen to you. And if you choose to want to have a say in where your life goes, Be open to the idea like the journey is going to be more important than the destination, and where you think you're going to go is probably not where you're going to end up, but you should be taking those steps anyways. And have faith that if long as you're on the path and you're going where you think you need to be going, other people will appear in your life that are going to be the solutions that you need. So if you say like, well, I know I need to be over here, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. Like if you get on a car ride and you go like, hey, like, I know I'm going to need gas about halfway there. Like you just know that there's going to be a gas station sometime close by when you need gas. And so like if you just realize like, hey, people are going to come to your life at the same time as long as you're on that journey, like don't wait for everything to be perfect. Just start going and you're going to be amazed at the people that come in your life that help you, the ideas that come from it, the opportunities that present themselves, and you're going to go in a completely different path than you ever thought possible.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Easiest way is to go to my website, natepeo.com. From there, you can get connected to the podcast. You can get connected to my social media. You can set up a discovery calls, or you can look at the opportunities to work with me. If you need some help on LinkedIn, we can get something set up and help you grow as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Nate. And for everyone who's watching or listening, we would love to hear what tip did you really like that Nate shared. Make sure to let us know in the comments below the video.